The very day I buried my son, my phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, telling me I had to vacate his house that night. I thought I was only facing greed, until I discovered my son's death was not as natural as the doctors said. They never expected what a 63-year-old woman, her hands shaking from arthritis, could do when cornered. My name is Evelyn Doyle. I am 63 years old, an Irish-American widow living out my days in the quiet suburbs of Ridgefield, Michigan. And I am telling you this because the story must be told. My voice is tired, worn down by grief, but do not mistake that for weakness. The cold edge you hear is what's left after everything else was burned away. We were burying my eldest son, Lucas. He was only 39, a risk analyst at Granite Harbor Capital. A good job, a solid life. The doctors called it sudden cardiac failure. A tragedy, they said. No questions asked, no suspicions raised. Just a healthy man's heart giving out without warning. The smell of lilies in the cemetery chapel was so thick it was suffocating. I stood by the gravesite, listening to the thud of dirt hitting the casket. Each shovelful felt like a blow against my own chest. I remembered Lucas as a boy, all skinned knees and bright, trusting eyes, trying to build a rocket in the backyard. The damp Michigan air settled into my bones, making my knees ache with arthritis, a dull throb that kept me grounded. But my mind was painfully clear. I watched that polished wooden lid disappear under the earth, and I felt a stillness I couldn't explain. My daughter-in-law, Brianna, was a perfect picture of controlled grief. She works in real estate, and she has that polished, impervious look. Her black dress was impeccable. She managed to dab at her eyes with a tissue in one hand, while taking hushed, urgent calls from lawyers on her phone with the other. She seemed terribly busy, the efficient widow handling arrangements. My youngest, Nathan, flew in from 2 states away. He's 35, a construction engineer, and he has always been the softer one. He stood awkwardly beside me, patting my arm but avoiding my eyes. He seemed terrified of the moment, clumsy in his suit, dodging any mention of wills or what came next. Between Brianna's cold efficiency and Nathan's avoidance, I felt utterly alone, an island of genuine pain in my own family's charade. After the last of the mourners had drifted away, Brianna approached me, her voice suddenly warm, concerned. "Mom," she said, touching my arm, "you should stay at Lucas's place tonight. You shouldn't be alone in your empty house." I felt a small, pathetic rush of gratitude. It was a kind thought. But even then, a small, cold knot tightened in my stomach, a whisper of unease. That night, I sat in Lucas's immaculate house in the Willow Creek estate. It was quiet. Too quiet. I sat on his grey sofa, clutching a tweed jacket I'd pulled from his closet. It still smelled of him, that clean, sharp scent of his laundry detergent and faint, lingering aftershave. The whole place spoke of his orderly, hard-working life. His mail was in a neat pile on the kitchen counter, his shoes lined up by the door, a life cut short, frozen in place. The phone rang just before midnight. The caller ID showed Brianna's name. I answered, expecting that same concerned tone from the cemetery. Instead, the voice that hit my ear was brittle, cold, and utterly foreign. She was in her car. I could hear the faint hum of the engine. "Evelyn?" she said. "Not Mom." "I'm glad you're there. It makes this simpler. You'll need to be out of the house after the first week." I said nothing. I couldn't have spoken if I'd tried. I'm sorry if this sounds harsh, she continued, her voice flat. But the property was in Lucas's name only, which means by law, it's mine. I need to get it on the market immediately. I sat there, still wearing the black dress I had worn to my son's funeral, and felt as if she had walked across the room and slapped me. The shock was so profound, it left me breathless. And in that awful, silent moment, the first thought took root, sharp and clear as ice. Something was wrong. This wasn't just greed. This was something hurried, something desperate, something they needed to hide, and it was locked inside the walls of this house. I couldn't sleep. I just kept replaying Brianna's voice in my head, the sheer coldness of it, while staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. I remembered a phone call with Lucas just a few months ago. I'd been complaining about my furnace acting up. If anything ever happens, Mum, you just come here, he'd said, his voice so warm and certain. There's always a room for you. This is your house too. The memory was a bitter contrast to the reality of being ordered out of that very room. The next morning, Brianna arrived as if the midnight call had never happened. She had 2 large coffees from the expensive downtown shop and a bright, sympathetic smile. I brought you a latte. Mum, she said, placing it on the coffee table. I just want to help you get stabilized. With the coffee, she produced a thick stack of papers and a pen. This is just some standard paperwork, she explained, her voice smooth as silk. It's a voluntary waiver of interest in the property. It just speeds things up. Lets me handle the estate without bothering you. My lawyer already reviewed it. I picked up the papers. My hands trembled slightly, a mix of arthritis and anger. The page was dense with legal jargon, hereby relinquishes. Testamentary claims. Immediate effect? I didn't understand half of it, but I understood the intent. Brianna, this looks very final, I said, my voice quiet. It's just a formality. She pushed, her smile tightening. Honestly, the longer we let this sit, the more complicated the probate gets. It's better for everyone if we settle it now. She was crowding me, the smell of her perfume suddenly nauseating. Just then, Nathan walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept either, his face puffy. Mum, Brianna showed me the papers. It makes sense. I looked at my youngest son, searching for an ally. I found none. Nathan, he just died. She wants me to sign away his house. She's not, he stammered, glancing at Brianna. It's just, you shouldn't be here alone. Mum, it's not good for you. This is just paperwork. Let Brianna handle it. I saw it then, clear as day. He was weak, afraid of confrontation, and his sister-in-law, with her sharp edges and legal talk, had him completely under her thumb. That night, I was pretending to be asleep on the sofa when they started talking in the kitchen. They must have thought I was sedated by grief. Their voices were low, but anger made them sharp. You promised you would get her to sign before the insurance company transfers the money. Brianna hissed. I'm trying. Brianna. She's grieving, Nathan whispered back, his voice pleading. I don't have time for her grief. Brianna snapped. That policy has a 30-day clause. If she's still living here, they can claim it's a property dispute and hold up the entire payment. I need her out. My blood ran cold. Insurance money. A large policy. Lucas had never mentioned a life insurance policy. Not one large enough to make Brianna act like this. Why would he hide it from me? And why this fixation on 30 days? Brianna kept repeating that phrase. Property dispute. It sounded rehearsed. It sounded like a threat. My mind flashed back to a dinner about 6 months ago. Lucas had called me, sounding exhausted. "I'm just so tired." "Mom?" he'd said. "Maybe I'm just working too many hours." Before I could ask more, Brianna had picked up an extension. "He's fine." "Evelyn," she'd said, her tone clipped. "It's just stress. We have to go." She'd hung up, cutting him off. At the time, I'd been annoyed by her rudeness. Now, it felt sinister. I started to see things I had overlooked in the fog of the funeral. On the kitchen counter, next to the coffee machine, were 2 prescription bottles. Heart medication. Lucas had never had a heart condition. I picked one up. The label was for a drug I didn't recognize. Taped to the refrigerator, half hidden by a takeout menu, was an appointment card for a cardiologist. As I stood there, Brianna walked in, sorting mail. I saw an envelope with the logo Bluefield Mutual on it. Before I could even register the name, she saw me looking, tore the letter in half, and then tore it again, stuffing the pieces deep into her purse. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I lay on the sofa, clutching the blanket, my eyes wide open in the dark. The pieces were all wrong. They didn't fit the picture of a sudden, natural death. They fit the picture of something else entirely. I will not sign anything. And if they think I am a naive old woman, they are going to pay. Grief is a fog, but suspicion is a lens. It brings the world into a sharp, cold focus. The next morning, I waited until Brianna and Nathan left the house, claiming they had to meet with the funeral home director about the final billing. The moment their car pulled away, I went to Lucas's home office. His desk was organized, just like the rest of his life. But in the bottom file drawer, tucked inside a folder labeled Household Misc. I found it. It wasn't the original, just a photocopy. But it was enough. The Bluefield Mutual life insurance policy. I scanned the pages, my old accounting skills kicking in. The payout was enormous, and the sole beneficiary, named just 6 months prior, was Brianna Doyle. Then I saw the fine print. A clause, stapled as an addendum. The payout was contingent on a clean settlement of the estate. Specifically, it stated the policy could be contested or delayed if there were any property disputes, or if a third-party, non-owner, was found to be in long-term residence within the mortgaged property within 30 days of the policyholder's death. A third-party, non-owner. Me. She needed me out, not just because of greed, but to trigger the payment, deeper in the same drawer. I found the mortgage documents. Lucas had refinanced the house, pulling out a significant amount of equity. The loan wasn't with a standard bank. It was with a private lender tied to his own company's Granite Harbor Opportunity Fund. I remembered him mentioning it, his voice low. "It's a bit riskier than I'd want you to know, Mum. But the upside is huge. If he defaulted, or if his death triggered a default, the fund could seize the house instantly." I put the papers in my oversized handbag. The one Brianna always joked was big enough to live in. And I left. I took a bus to the other side of Ridgefield, to the Harbour Light Medical Centre. I'd worked part-time in their billing department for 15 years before I retired. Marlene was still there, perched behind her desk, sharp as ever. "Evelyn?" she said, her voice soft with sympathy as she hugged me. I was so sorry to hear about Lucas. "I need a favour." "Marlene." I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm not here as a friend. I need the best billing investigator I've ever known. I didn't tell her everything, just that something felt wrong about Lucas's finances. I gave her the two names Brianna Carter Doyle and Granite Harbor Capital. I just wanted to know if there was any public data, any red flags. She typed for 20 minutes, her face impassive. Well, she finally said, printing a few pages. This is interesting. Your daughter-in-law's real estate license has 2 formal complaints tied to it. Both lawsuits for client fraud. Both settled out of court last year. Quietly. She pointed to another screen. And Lucas. He started making very large, regular transfers to a new joint savings account, one held by both him and Brianna, starting about 4 months ago. I left Marlene's office and went to the small cafe near Lucas's building. I just wanted to sit where he sat. As I ordered a tea, a young man at a nearby table looked up. Mrs. Doyle. I'm Jared, from Lucas's office. I saw you at the service. He had a kind, open face. We talked for a minute, him saying all the right things about how respected Lucas was. Then he hesitated. This is probably weird, he said, lowering his voice. But about a month ago, Lucas seemed really stressed. He mentioned you. He said, if anything ever happens to me, my mom is going to need to know some things about my house. My heart hammered against my ribs. What things? Jared looked nervous. He was working on an internal audit. He thought an employee at Granite Harbor was leaking investment information to an outside real estate firm, letting them buy up properties before the fund announced its investments. He was trying to trace the leak. A real estate firm. Brianna. I asked Jared for the name of Lucas's boss, Adrian Cole, the director of risk. I called the main line for Granite Harbor Capital from a payphone at the back of the cafe. When I asked for Mr. Cole, the secretary's voice turned to ice. Mr. Cole is not available. We are handling all legal fallout related to Mr. Doyle's death internally. She hung up. Legal fallout, not tragic loss. That night, Brianna was a different person. She was sweet, almost sickeningly so. She cooked a large pasta dinner, something Lucas had loved. Evelyn, I know I've been stressed, she said, placing a hand over mine. I just want you to know I will always take care of you, like my own mother. You just have to let me handle the legal side. It's too much for you right now. I nodded and ate, the food tasting like ash. Her eyes, however, kept flicking to my handbag, which I had placed by the sofa, the bag that now held the insurance policy. Later, when the house was dark and I could hear her steady breathing from the master bedroom, I sat at the kitchen table. I took out a small notebook and a pen. I wrote down everything. The 30-day clause, the mortgage fund, the settled lawsuits, Jared's words, the secretary's cold denial. I wrote it all down in neat, clear script. This wasn't just a diary. It was a war journal. If they were going to try and paint me as a confused, grieving old woman, I would use every single page to hold on to my memory, and I would use it to destroy them. I was standing in Lucas's kitchen, staring at the prescription bottles on the counter, when my phone vibrated. It was a blocked number, anonymous. I let it ring twice, then answered, my voice wary. Mrs. Doyle. The voice was male, deep, and clipped. Who is this? My name is Adrian Cole. I was Lucas's supervisor at Granite Harbor Capital. We need to meet? Today, if possible. The name hit me. I called your office. Your secretary said you were dealing with legal fallout and were unavailable. I was unavailable to a phone call, he said, his tone sharp. I am not unavailable for this. Can you come to my office and Mrs. Doyle? You must not, under any circumstances. Tell your daughter-in-law or your son that you are meeting me. The offices of Granite Harbour Capital were on the 20th floor of a glass high-rise in the financial district. Adrian Cole's personal office was walled in glass, overlooking Ridgefield, making me feel exposed. He was a stern-looking man in an expensive suit, and he didn't waste time on condolences. As soon as I sat, he pressed a button on his desk console. With a faint hiss, the clear glass walls turned a milky, opaque white, sealing us in. The sudden, silent privacy was more unnerving than the exposure. I am taking a significant risk by having you here, Mrs. Doyle, he said, turning his computer monitor toward me. This is what your son was working on before he died. He showed me an email chain. Lucas, meticulous as always, tracking data points. Lucas suspected a major information leak, Adrian explained, his finger tracing a line on the screen. He believed one of our senior partners was feeding inside information to a real estate broker who was very close to the leadership. This broker was helping wealthy clients acquire properties just before our opportunity fund invested, inflating the values. He clicked to the last email in the chain, a summary Lucas had prepared for him. My breath caught. The name of the brokerage firm he was investigating was Brianna Carter Properties. It gets worse, Adrian said, his voice grim. He opened another file. Lucas found this draft contract on our internal server 2 weeks ago. It's for the sale of his own house. I leaned in. The seller was listed as Lucas Doyle. The buyer was a numbered investment trust, anonymous. The price was shockingly low, pennies on the dollar for a Willow Creek estate home. This was prepared before he died, Adrian said. He never signed it. He found it, and he knew he was being maneuvered. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white. What are you saying? Adrian looked me square in the eye. 3 days before he died, Lucas sat in that exact chair. He told me he thought someone was interfering with his medication. He said he was feeling unusually tired, dizzy, particularly after dinners his wife cooked. He said he didn't have proof, but he was scared, and he was compiling a file. He took a deep breath. Lucas had no severe heart condition. Mrs. Doyle. We do extensive executive physicals. It's mandatory for his position. He had stress, high blood pressure, but nothing that would lead to sudden cardiac failure on its own. He was preparing a formal report. He believed someone was trying to leverage his insurance and his assets, and he connected it to this real estate scheme. And then, he was dead. The company, Adrian admitted, looking disgusted, is trying to bury this, an internal investigation linking a senior partner to an employee's death. It would destroy the fund. They are officially ruling it a tragic loss and stopping all internal inquiries. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, black USB drive. But I am a father, Mrs. Doyle, and Lucas was a good man. He sent me a secure file with his personal research the night before he died. A failsafe. This is a copy. I am giving it to you, officially, as his next of kin. My hand, the one that usually trembled with arthritis, was perfectly steady as I took it. What's on it? Everything he found, including the scan of the application for his increased life insurance policy. I didn't wait to go home. I pulled my old laptop from my bag. Adrian watched as I plugged in the drive. The files were clearly labeled. I clicked on Insurance. It was the application for the Bluefield Mutual policy, the one that had increased his coverage so drastically. It was an electronic form, and the agent of record who had filed it was listed clearly Brianna Carter. And there, in the medical history section, a checkbox. Does the applicant have any pending cardiac examinations or specialist referrals? The box was checked no, but beside it was a scanned note from Lucas's doctor, dated just 1 week prior, recommending an immediate cardiac stress test, a test he never took, a test Brianna had claimed he didn't need. I closed the laptop. The click echoed in the silent, white room. I stood up, my old bones feeling like steel. I looked at Adrian Cole. "The company is making a mistake," I said. I walked to the door. He pressed the button, and the glass walls hissed, clearing to reveal the bright, uncaring city. I rode the elevator down. My hand closed tightly around the USB drive in my pocket. It felt like a stone, heavy and cold. I walked out of the building and stopped on the pavement, catching my own reflection in the dark, mirrored glass. I saw a 63-year-old widow, small and tired, dressed in black. But the woman staring back at me wasn't just a victim. If they killed my son for money, I thought, staring into my own cold eyes, then what I am about to do is not self-defense. It is revenge. When I returned to Lucas's house, I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was a hunter. But my prey was young and sharp, and they saw me as old and frail. I decided to give them exactly what they wanted to see. I began to shuffle when I walked. I would stand in the middle of the kitchen, looking lost, until Brianna asked what I needed. "Oh, dear," I'd murmur, pressing my temples. "I came in for the... Oh, what was it? Tea. Mom," Nathan would offer, his voice strained with impatience. "Yes, tea, that's right." I asked Brianna the same questions, over and over. "Now, what time did you say the bank was calling? Was that Tuesday or Wednesday, dear?" I saw the look they exchanged over my head. It was a look of condescending pity and, more importantly, of relief. A confused old woman was not a threat. She was a problem that could be managed. While they were at a planning meeting with their lawyer, I took the prescription bottles from Lucas's counter, the heart medication, and the sleeping pills he'd supposedly been taking. I put them in my purse and took the bus to the Ridgeway Free Clinic, on the poor side of town where no one from Willow Creek would ever go. I found a young resident, looked at him with my most bewildered expression, and held out the bottles. "Doctor," I whispered, "I'm so afraid. My son, he passed, and these were his... They look so much like my own pills. Could you just tell me what's in them? I'm so terrified I'll take the wrong ones." He was kind, overworked, and saw exactly what I wanted him to see. A dotty old woman worried about her medication. He agreed to run a basic analysis. I picked up the report 2 days later. The sleeping pills were standard, but the heart medication, the report said it contained a high level of a common beta blocker, but also traces of another substance, a stimulant. The notes at the bottom were clinical. In a patient under significant stress, this combination, especially if paired with alcohol or high levels of caffeine, could induce severe arrhythmia or acute cardiac failure. This wasn't bad medical care. This was a weapon, a loaded gun, delivered one pill at a time. I went home and found an old smartphone Lucas had left in a drawer. I downloaded the simplest voice recording app I could find. I started leaving it on, hidden in my apron pocket. Whenever Brianna was in the room, I'd bait her. "I just don't understand this insurance. Brianna?" I'd say, sounding weak. "It seems like so much money. And the house. Lucas always said the house was for me." "Evelyn, you're confused." She'd snap, her patience wearing thin. "The house is an asset, and the insurance is my business. Lucas signed it that way. You don't want to complicate my business. Do you?" It was small, but it was a start. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I went to my church directory and found the name Loretta Miles, a black woman, middle-aged, who ran a small law firm out of a modest brick building. She wasn't high-priced, she was a fighter. I knew her from the bake sales. I sat in her office and told her most of it. I told her about the midnight phone call, the 30-day clause, the pressure to sign the waiver. I told her about the pills. I did not, however, mention Adrian Cole or the USB drive. That was my test. Loretta's eyes were sharp. She didn't dismiss me. She poured me a cup of coffee and said, "Evelyn, the first thing you do is sign nothing. Absolutely nothing. The second thing I'm going to do is file an immediate petition to freeze the status of that house. We'll cite elder abuse and suspicious circumstances surrounding the insurance policy. That will stop the 30-day clock dead." With Loretta handling the law, I handled the paranoia. I waited until Nathan was alone, his face buried in his phone. "Nathan," I said softly, "I'm so worried." "About what?" "Mom. I was at the clinic for my arthritis, and I overheard a nurse. She said sometimes, when a young man dies so suddenly like Lucas, the police, they might review the death. If there are, irregularities." It was a complete fabrication. Nathan's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "What? Why would they do that?" "I don't know, dear." It just frightened me. That evening, I heard him talking to Brianna in the garage. His voice was loud, panicked. "What if they look into it? Brianna, what if they actually look?" Her response was a furious, muffled shriek. I had thrown the rock. Now I would watch the ripples. That night, long after they were asleep, I sat at Lucas's desk. I took out a sheet of his good stationery and my best pen. I wrote a letter, not as a confused old woman, but as a meticulous citizen. I addressed it to the county district attorney's office. I outlined my suspicions, the pressure, the insurance policy, the 30-day deadline, and I enclosed a photocopy of the lab report from the Ridgeway Clinic. I ended it by stating I was a cooperative witness. Should they choose to open a formal investigation? I sealed the envelope. I walked to the bedroom I was using and taped a small, old photograph of Lucas, one from his college graduation, his eyes so bright to the corner of the mirror. I looked at his face, so full of promise. "You used to say you worried about me, Lucas." I whispered to the image, my voice low and steady. "Now it's my turn to worry about you, in a way they'll never see coming." It didn't take long. 2 days after Loretta filed the petition, the bomb went off. I was in the kitchen, pretending to read an old cookbook, when Brianna's phone rang. I heard a sharp intake of breath, then a strangled, "What do you mean?" "Frozen." She stormed into the kitchen, her face a mask of pale fury. Her professional veneer was gone, shattered. What did you do? She screamed, slamming her phone onto the granite counter. The bank just called. The house is under a temporary legal hold. My account is flagged. You did this. I don't know what you're talking about, I murmured, clutching the cookbook. Stop it, she spat. Stop playing this pathetic victim game. Who have you been talking to? Who is putting these paranoid, crazy ideas into your head? Nathan rushed in, drawn by the shouting, his face pale. Brianna, keep your voice down. Mom, what's going on? She's trying to ruin us. Nathan, my weak, malleable son, took on the role of peacemaker. Okay, look, this is exactly what I was worried about, he said, turning to me. Mom, you're clearly stressed. You're not thinking straight. You're lashing out. He looked at Brianna, then back at me, his eyes pleading. This is why we need a real solution. Mum, there's a facility, a nice one, called Willow Creek Gardens. It's just a few miles away. They have 24/7 medical care, doctors on site. It's for the best. You need to be somewhere you can be managed. They weren't just trying to get me out of the house. They were trying to have me committed. Brianna acted fast. The very next afternoon, she brought a man to the house. Evelyn, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. This is Dr. Howard Grant. He's a top neurologist, a specialist in memory care. He's a friend, and he offered to stop by as a favor, just to talk with you. Dr. Grant was tan, wore a suit that cost more than my first car, and had a smile that never reached his eyes. When he shook Brianna's hand, it wasn't a formal greeting. It was a familiar, conspiratorial clasp. Brianna, so good to see you, he said. I recognized him instantly from a local magazine profile, a VIP doctor, known for his exclusive, high-paying clients. He was her hired gun, here to write the report that would put me away. They sat me at the dining room table for the assessment. I had my old phone, the one with the recording app, propped up on the sideboard, partially hidden by a vase, the camera lens pointing right at us. I gave them the performance of a lifetime. I shuffled. I seemed confused by his questions. Now, what? What day did you say it was? Young man? I asked. It's Thursday. Evelyn, he said, his voice overly patient. Oh, dear. I was sure it was Tuesday. Am I? Am I forgetting things? Brianna put her hand on mine. You're just tired, Mom. But then, Dr. Grant tried to pin me down. Evelyn, can you tell me the full names of your grandchildren? I paused, as if searching. Then I looked him dead in the eye. I don't have any grandchildren. I let the statement hang in the air. Brianna's face tightened. But I do have 2 sons, I continued, my voice suddenly clear and sharp. Lucas David Doyle, born May 1st, 1986. Nathan James Doyle, born March 3rd, 1990. My social security number ends in 4291. My late husband's savings account, which I closed in 2010, was at Michigan First Reserve, account number. I recited all 12 digits. Is that the kind of information you were looking for? Dr. Grant's pen stopped moving. His smooth smile faltered. After the exam, Brianna walked him to the front door, right into the phone's line of sight. They thought I was still in the dining room. Their voices were low, but the microphone was strong. She's sharp, but highly agitated, Grant murmured. I saw the confusion. We can definitely build a case for mild cognitive impairment. Maybe onset dementia. We can get you what you need, as long as she doesn't get a lawyer involved. Just get it done. Howard, Brianna whispered back. I need the report by Monday. I stopped the recording. I showed the video to Loretta Miles in her office an hour later. She watched it, her expression hardening with every word. When Grant's voice was captured, she let out a low whistle. Well, that's not just unethical, Evelyn. That's conspiracy to commit fraud. She looked at me. You've been holding out on me. It was time. I reached into my bag and placed the USB drive on her desk. This, I said, is from Lucas's boss. It's the real insurance application Brianna filed, falsifying his medical data. It's his internal investigation into her company. It's everything. Loretta plugged it in. She read for 5 solid minutes, her face grim. Finally, she closed the laptop. My God, she said. This isn't about a house. This is a murder investigation. She stood up. I'm filing the video, the USB, and a petition for an immediate, court-appointed independent evaluation of your competency. The pressure was working. Brianna was fraying. Later that week, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice a low hiss. My other recorder was already running in my apron pocket. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Making calls, talking to lawyers, trying to sabotage me. I'm trying to understand what happened to my son, I said, my voice trembling just enough. What happened is he had a bad heart. She snapped. And you fighting me like this. If Lucas had known you were going to be so difficult, he probably never would have signed for such a high policy in the first place. I had her. A direct admission that she knew about the policy's high value before he died. The final blow came not from me, but from the system I had triggered. An official courier arrived with an envelope from the Ridgefield County District Attorney. Brianna saw the logo and snatched it, thinking it was for her. It's addressed to me, I said, taking it from her. I opened it in front of her. My hands shook, but this time, it wasn't an act. It was a summons. What is it? She demanded. It's a subpoena. I read. Requesting the testimony of Evelyn Doyle as a potential witness in a preliminary investigation concerning the death of Lucas Doyle. The colour drained from her face. She stumbled back, hitting the counter. She didn't yell. She went utterly, terrifyingly silent. She fumbled for her phone, ran into the garage, and I heard her frantic dialing. I need him. No, not that one. I need the other one. The one who handles the real problems. She came back inside, her eyes like 2 chips of ice. She walked until she was standing over me, blocking the light from the window. You have no idea who you are messing with. Old woman, she whispered. I looked up from the subpoena, meeting her gaze. The frail, confused old woman was gone. No, Brianna, I said, my voice cold and steady as steel. You are the one who has no idea who I am. Loretta and I were no longer playing defense. We were setting a snare. Her legal mind was sharp, and she understood Brianna's weakness, the frozen insurance payout. She's desperate. Evelyn. Loretta advised me over the phone. The DA's investigation is a roadblock. We're going to provide her with what looks like a detour, but it's really a cliff. The trap was psychological. I needed to leverage her greed against her paranoia. I waited until I knew Brianna was listening from the next room. I was on the phone with Nathan, my voice intentionally frail and confused. Oh, I was just talking to that nice lawyer. Loretta, I said. She mentioned the strangest thing. She said the insurance company might still have to pay the full amount. Yes. Even with the police asking questions. If it could be proven that Lucas stopped taking his heart medication by himself, against his doctor's orders. Something about policyholder non-compliance. I let that seed plant itself. The next day, I set the second part of the trap. I sat at the dining room table, pretending to sort through a box of Lucas's old papers. When Brianna walked by, I held up a small, leather-bound notebook. "Oh, my," I said, as if startled. I completely forgot Lucas kept a health diary. Brianna stopped dead, her eyes fixed on the book. "He wrote everything down in here." I continued, flipping a page. What he ate, his stress levels. "Oh, dear." I feigned embarrassment. "He even wrote down that conversation you two had, where you told him the doctors were just trying to scare him, that those heart pills were just a big pharma money-making scheme. I suppose that's not important. Is it?" I watched the blood drain from her face. She didn't see a grieving mother. She saw a witness, and a piece of evidence that would prove she had actively discouraged him from seeking medical care. If that diary existed, it destroyed the very loophole I had just invented. That night, I got what I wanted. I left the diary on the desk in Lucas's office. I sat in the dark in the guest room across the hall, my phone's camera aimed at his office doorway. At nearly 2 a.m, the hallway floor creaked. Brianna, dressed in a dark hoodie, slipped silently into the room. She didn't turn on the light. She used the flashlight on her phone, ransacking the desk, pulling drawers open, her movements jerky and desperate. I filmed it all, my hand rock steady. I filmed the exact moment she found the notebook. She flipped it open, the narrow beam of her light scanning the pages. I saw her body slump in pure frustration. It was just my old ledger, filled with grocery lists and household expenses from 5 years ago. The next morning, Loretta had the video file. She immediately sent it to the district attorney's office. The prosecutor, Daniel Ruiz, had been hesitant, walking a fine line. My letter and the drug analysis had opened the door. But this video kicked it off its hinges. This was not a grieving widow. This was an intruder, tampering with the personal effects of the deceased during an active investigation. It was the act of a guilty conscience. Ruiz now had the political cover and the legal justification he needed to dig deeper. And he did. With his newfound authority, Ruiz ran Brianna's real estate license against other suspicious deaths. He found a match, a case 3 years prior, right here in Willow Creek Estate. A middle-aged businessman had died in an accidental fall down his basement stairs, just days before a massive life insurance policy was paid out. The broker who had handled the sale of the house, and who had personally recommended the insurance agent, was Brianna. As Ruiz began connecting the dots of her past, Adrian Cole attacked her future. He filed his formal complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission, handing over Lucas's entire investigation into the insider trading ring and Brianna Carter properties. Suddenly, Brianna was being hit from 2 sides. The county was investigating her for homicide. The federal government was investigating her for financial fraud. She was boxed in. She was fraying, constantly on the phone, her voice a low, furious hiss. I knew it was time. I found her in the kitchen, furiously wiping down counters that were already clean. My apron pocket recorder was on. "Brianna," I said softly, injecting all the false sympathy I could muster. This has all gone too far. I see the toll it's taking on you." She stopped wiping, her back to me. "If you would just tell me the truth," I said, stepping closer. "Just tell me. Admit that this wasn't an accident. If you tell me, I can go to Mr. Ruiz. I can tell him you cooperated, that you're remorseful. I can ask him to be lenient." It was a lie, a predator's offer, and she was desperate enough to take it. She spun around, her face a grotesque mask of tears and rage. She slammed her hand on the counter. "Lenient," she shrieked. "You think this is about leniency? I didn't want him to die. I just added a little medicine to his protein shake. Just enough to make him fail the company physical, to make him slow down, to make him finally listen to me and quit that job." Her voice cracked, the confession pouring out of her in a torrent of self-pity. I didn't know his heart was that weak. If he had just stayed home, if he had just done what I said, none of this would have been necessary. I didn't breathe. I let her words, her full confession, soak into the air and into the digital recorder. I said nothing. I just turned and walked away, leaving her sobbing over the sink. I stopped the recording. I sent the crystal-clear audio file to Loretta. Loretta immediately packaged it with the original lab analysis from the Ridgeway Clinic, the analysis that showed the exact combination of stimulants and beta blockers Brianna had just described. She sent it all directly to Daniel Ruiz. The motive, the means, and the confession. It was less than an hour later that I heard the sirens approaching. I looked out the front window and saw 2 squad cars and an unmarked sedan pull into the driveway. Daniel Ruiz himself got out, holding a document. He had his search warrant. The final battle was about to begin. The grand jury was convened to determine if there was enough evidence to formally indict Brianna. This wasn't a trial. Not yet. But it was the main battle. The charges Daniel Ruiz was seeking were explosive aggravated manslaughter with financial motive and insurance fraud. The local media had caught the scent, framing it as a sensational story of family betrayal, the grieving mother-in-law versus the greedy widow. I walked into the courtroom wearing a simple black wool dress. I used the cane my doctor had prescribed for my arthritis, a prop I had once despised but now used to my full advantage. Let them see the frail old woman. But my eyes, I knew, were sharp. When I took the stand, I was calm. I was not the victim. I was the narrator. I recounted everything, my voice steady and clear. I started with the midnight phone call, the order to vacate the house while I was still wearing my funeral clothes. I described the papers she'd tried to force me to sign, the constant pressure, the 30-day deadline she was so obsessed with. I spoke of the prescription bottles on the counter and the torn-up letter from Bluefield Mutual, Brianna's defense attorney, a slick man whose suit probably cost as much as my car, tried to paint me as an unreliable narrator. "Mrs. Doyle," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "You were grieving. Isn't it true you were confused, perhaps easily influenced? Isn't it possible you've pieced together a fantasy based on crime shows you've watched?" "My son was dead," I said, my voice level. I was in shock, but I was not confused. That was when Mr. Ruiz introduced his first piece of evidence, the video from my phone. He played it on a large screen for the grand jury. There I was, confused, reciting my bank account number to the digit, and there was Dr. Howard Grant telling Brianna on the front step, "We can definitely build a case for mild cognitive impairment, as long as she doesn't get a lawyer involved." The defense attorney's smirk vanished. Then Ruiz played the audio file, my apron pocket recording. The sound of Brianna's voice, high and shrieking, filled the silent room. I just added a little medicine to his protein shake. I didn't know his heart was that weak. He followed it immediately with the testimony of the toxicologist from the Ridgeway Clinic, who explained how that specific combination of a stimulant and a beta blocker was a lethal cocktail for a man under stress. Ruiz didn't call it murder. He called it, clinically, reckless homicide for financial gain. Adrian Cole was next. He was impeccable in his grey suit, and his testimony was devastating. He confirmed Lucas's fears about his medication. He confirmed Lucas was conducting an internal investigation into Brianna's company. His testimony skillfully painted Brianna not just as a grieving wife who'd made a terrible mistake, but as a cold, calculating business partner in a network of greed. Nathan was the witness I had dreaded. He looked thin, broken. He couldn't look at me. He spoke in a low monotone, answering Ruiz's questions. Yes. Brianna had told him the insurance money was contingent on the house. Yes. She had repeatedly and urgently pressured him to convince Mom to go to a facility to get her out of the way. He admitted he had trusted Brianna, that he believed he was helping me. He looked, for the first time, like the fool he had been. Even Dr. Grant, facing the loss of his medical license, turned on her. He testified that Brianna had suggested the mild cognitive impairment diagnosis. He tried to save himself, claiming he was merely assessing her, and that Brianna had been the one to suggest the outcome. She said she needed to protect Mrs. Doyle from herself, he said, avoiding eye contact. He had, in his cowardice, confirmed the conspiracy. Finally, Brianna's attorney stood for his last attempt. He turned to the jury. What motive could Mrs. Doyle have for this elaborate fabrication? Let's consider. If Brianna Doyle is convicted, the primary beneficiary of the will is invalidated. And who stands to gain control of the house, the assets, the estate? The woman sitting right there. He pointed at me. The air in the room shifted. He had planted the seed of doubt that this was just my own brand of greed. I looked at Mr. Ruiz. He nodded, giving me the floor. I looked at the jury, and then at Brianna's lawyer. That is an interesting theory, I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the stillness. It's a shame, then, that I've already signed my own updated will. In the event I inherit my son's estate, 100% of it, including the house, is to be transferred to a scholarship fund at the University of Michigan, in Lucas Doyle's name. My lawyer filed it last week. A collective intake of breath. The lawyer stared, speechless. I had taken his last weapon and broken it over my knee. The judge cleared his throat. He looked at the grand jury. We will now adjourn for you to consider the evidence. But it is this court's opinion that the prosecution has met its burden. The indictment was coming. Brianna locked eyes with me. It was not the look of a panicked victim. It was pure, distilled hatred, mixed with the dawning, cold terror of being trapped. I looked back, my face impassive, and for the first time since my son's heart stopped, I felt a small, sharp, and terribly cold taste of legal, righteous revenge. The indictment was a match, but Brianna's confession was the gasoline. Awaiting trial and facing a life sentence, she did what all cornered rats do. She tried to bargain, desperate to reduce her charges. She began to sing. She gave Daniel Ruiz a list of names, rich clients, Ridgefield's elite, who had used her services and Dr. Grant's to arrange medical accidents and convenient deaths for insurance payouts. It was a pattern, a business model, a specific cocktail of medication, a falsified medical report, and a fast-tracked insurance claim, with Brianna taking a hefty percentage as the consultant. Ruiz's team found the case I had only glimpsed the businessman in Willow Creek Estate who had supposedly fallen down his stairs 3 years ago. He was Brianna's client. His widow had insisted at the time that he was dizzy, that his medication had been changed. But Dr. Grant had ruled it an accident, and the insurance company had dismissed her claims. Now, she had a voice, and she had an ally in the DA's office. Loretta arranged a meeting. It was held in the quiet back room of a church, not as a legal strategy, but as a support group. There were 2 other women there, the widow from the stairfall case, and another, a woman whose brother had died of a sudden allergic reaction while holding a multi-million-dollar policy, also facilitated by Brianna. I listened to their stories, each one an echo of my own: the sudden death, the suspicious doctor, the aggressive push for an insurance payout, the dismissal of their concerns. I realized, sitting in that dimly lit room, that this was never just about Lucas. My son was just one link in a long, cold chain of predatory greed. My personal revenge, seeing Brianna in prison, suddenly felt too small. I didn't just want the snake's head. I wanted to burn the entire nest. "We can destroy the whole system," I said, my voice low. "We use this trial to expose not just her, but the doctors who sign off, the insurance agents who look the other way, and the investors who profit." Loretta, ever practical, knew the courts were not enough. The courts want one conviction. The public needs to see the whole network. She made a call. The next day, I was sitting with Maya King, an investigative reporter for the state paper. She had been chasing rumors of insurance abuse in the financial sector for a year. I told her everything. I gave her the timeline, the names, the methodology. I told her about Adrian Cole and the insider trading. I only asked for one thing. "You publish nothing until the judge's gavel falls on the final verdict. I will not have my son's case jeopardized by a mistrial." She agreed. During this time, Nathan was a ghost. He barely ate. He sat in the living room, staring at the walls. The guilt was eating him alive. Finally, one evening, he broke. "I did it, Mum," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I signed the papers." "What papers?" "Nathan. Brianna. She came to me a few months ago, before Lucas. She said Lucas was being difficult about his executive protection paperwork. She said it was just a formality to increase his policy for their future, and that he was too stressed to deal with it. She just needed a family witness signature." He was choking on the words. "I didn't even read them. I just signed. I think I helped her increase the insurance. Mom, I helped her." I looked at my youngest son, the one I had always protected, and I felt nothing but a cold weariness. There would be no hugs, no easy absolution. "You let them use you as a tool against your own brother," I said, my voice hard. "You chose ignorance because it was easier than confrontation. The only way you can even begin to atone for that is to stand up in that courtroom, in front of the world, and tell the complete, shameful truth. You will live with this. That is your penance." While my house was one of cold truths, Brianna's was one of hot threats. She was out on bail, confined to her condo, and her silent partners were no longer silent. The wealthy clients she had named, the executives at the insurance companies, the partners at Silver Pine Holdings. The anonymous investment fund Lucas was investigating were now threatening her. They had deeper pockets and better lawyers. She was trapped. If she testified against them, they would destroy her, perhaps literally. If she stayed silent, she would take the full fall for Lucas's death, and they would walk away clean. The pressure was making her crack. The first domino fell a week before the trial was set to begin. Loretta called me. "You're not going to believe this. Evelyn, try me." The FBI just raided the offices of Silver Pine Holdings. It seems Ms. Doyle's testimony, combined with the SEC complaint from Adrian Cole, was enough to get a federal warrant. They just arrested the CEO. I hung up the phone. I looked at the picture of Lucas on my mirror. Brianna's conviction would be justice. This was the start of my revenge. The trial was a spectacle. The media vans lined the street, and the courtroom was standing room only. The charges Daniel Ruiz had secured were heavy manslaughter for financial gain, insurance fraud, and felony conspiracy. This was no longer just my private fight. My son's story had become the key to unlocking a massive criminal enterprise. Before the final closing arguments, as I sat in the sterile witness room, a bailiff approached. "Mrs. Doyle." The defendant, Ms. Doyle, is requesting a private word. Her lawyer and Mr. Ruiz have provisionally agreed. If you do? Loretta looked at me, her eyes questioning. I nodded. "I'll see her." They brought her in, uncuffed. A guard stood just outside the open door, the gap no wider than 6 inches. The air crackled. Brianna was thinner, gaunt, the expensive tailoring of her suit hanging limply, but her eyes still held that familiar, arrogant fire. "You look pleased. Evelyn," she hissed. "I look tired. Brianna." "They're going to convict me," she stated. "A fact. But when you give your victim impact statement, you can ask the judge for leniency. You can write a letter. Tell them I was just desperate." I stared at her, saying nothing. "If you do that..." She leaned in, her voice a low threat. "I'll keep my mouth shut about Nathan. I won't mention how he signed those witness forms for the insurance increase. I won't drag him down with me. You don't want to lose both your sons, do you?" It was her last, pathetic attempt at blackmail. I reached into my pocket, my hand steady. I pulled out the small digital recorder I had carried since the day I visited the clinic. I placed it on the small table between us. I pressed the red button to stop the recording. "Thank you, Brianna," I said, my voice perfectly level. "You have just given Mr. Ruiz the final piece of evidence he needs to ensure Nathan is treated as a coerced witness, not a conspirator. And you have just proven, beyond all doubt, that even at the very end, you will only ever use people as shields." Her face, a mask of cunning, crumpled into pure, unadulterated shock. The guard stepped in. In the courtroom, Daniel Ruiz played the recording. The jury heard her attempt to tamper with a witness, to leverage my love for my other son against me. Any shred of pity, any lingering doubt that she was just a woman who had made a mistake, was annihilated. They saw her, finally, as a predator. Her lawyer knew it was over. His closing argument was a weak plea for mercy. Then, the judge allowed Brianna to speak. She stood, and she wept. She spoke of a poor childhood, of scratching her way to the top. "I never wanted Lucas to die. she cried, her voice echoing. I just wanted him to listen to me. I just wanted him to quit that job and finally do what I said. The words, meant to humanize her, only sealed her fate, revealing the chilling, absolute need for control that had started it all. The judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. He sentenced her to many long years for manslaughter, more years for the fraud, additional time to be served consecutively for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and the attempted blackmail of a witness. Brianna seemed to collapse, and then she turned in the box, her eyes finding mine, her face contorted with rage. You, she screamed, pointing at me. You destroyed my life. I looked back at her, my hands folded on my cane. I spoke very softly, but in the dead, silent courtroom, the words carried. You murdered my son. I just pressed play for the whole world to hear. As they led her away, my phone buzzed with the news alert Maya King had prepared. The dam had broken. The FBI, using the information from my USB drive and Brianna's own panicked confessions, was announcing the formal indictments of the CEO of Silver Pine Holdings and 3 senior executives at Bluefield Mutual. My son's story had become the spark that lit a fire under the entire corrupt enterprise. My revenge was no longer just for me. It was for everyone they had ever targeted. I walked out of the courthouse onto the top step, into the blinding flash of cameras. Nathan pushed through the reporters and fell to his knees on the concrete, grabbing my hand. Mum, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. I looked down at my weeping son. I did not hug him. I did not offer him easy comfort. Get up. Nathan, I said, my voice firm. He struggled to his feet, his face a mess of tears and shame. You will look me in the eye, I commanded, and you will spend the rest of your life proving you are not like the people who used you. You will live with honesty, and you will never, ever look away again, because the truth is difficult. That is the only way we move forward. The next week, I returned to Lucas's house in Willow Creek Estate for the last time. The papers for the scholarship fund were on the counter, waiting for my signature. I walked through the empty rooms, not with the fog of grief, but with the cold clarity of an auditor. This house, the tool of Brianna's greed, had become my weapon. The kitchen, the scene of his poisoning, had become my recording studio. I had taken the bottomless, unbearable pain of a 63-year-old woman who had just buried her child, and I had transformed it into a final, binding sentence for the people who thought she would only know how to cry. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, give this video a like, and please support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.